this is not bad. It's pretty good.
For a second show. New people, except for me and Sabir and Zahid.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming yet again to the second day at the second floor, where we're discussing the Prevention of eCrimes bill that has been passed by the cabinet, approved by the cabinet, and is to be sent to the National Assembly to be passed by our National Assembly or Parliament. Which means that not much usually changes between what it looks like right now, and what it will look like once the law has been promulgated. Before this, the government would, if we were to ask them, could we have a copy, while they were making certain changes in cabinet, told us it was secret, and we couldn't actually even get a hold of a copy. So some friends, etc., helped out. They said, you know, here's a copy, etc. So journalists got us something, so we were able to comment. But up until then, we were very, we weren't able to comment with the confidence that this is what you're working on, because they're always trying to say, no, we've dealt with all these issues, and all of this has been sorted out. Obviously, it hasn't, because everything we commented on 3 years ago is still in the bill. It's exactly as it was earlier. They keep saying they're changing it, and they don't. For instance, what they did was, if they wanted to change something, they would take it from the top of the bill and put it to the bottom. That was pretty much it. They thought they were changing things. Anyway, to give you just a background of who I am, I'm a lawyer. I helped the government draft for free the government electronic transactions ordinance in 2002, which was the first IT law of Pakistan. That legislation was passed on the September 11, 2002, and since that day, Pakistan's electronic arena has got some law supporting it. This wasn't a legislation that stopped you, didn't prohibit you, but it actually facilitated people to use their computers and electronic equipment. So, a couple of sections were put in which had to do with electronic crime or cyber crime. And you have section 36 in that law, which says that if anybody gains or attempts to gain access to any information system being a computer, with or without intent to acquire the information or gain knowledge, is liable for a 7-year fine and 1 million rupees as a maximum fine and 7 years as the maximum sentence. It is very similar to the law that exists in England, and most of the legislation, I've broken it down. Most of the clauses inside this legislation have been taken from international best practice. So this is something that already exists. Another one is damage to information system. If you alter, modify, delete, remove, generate, transmit, or store information which impairs the operation of the information system or prevents or hinders access to that information system, and you do this knowingly without authority, then you are liable again for the same degree of penalty. The whole concept of doing it without authority is crucial, and intention also is very crucial as part of that law. But we had certain problems when several other cyber crimes that were taking place in Pakistan did not have legislation that we could use to actually go after the criminals. Part of the reason, I think, is because the government didn't actually put enough of an effort in implementing that properly with resource. For instance, the agency within the Federal Investigation Agency called the NR3C, or the National Response to Cybercrime Cell, didn't have a budget. It just didn't have one. And these are the guys who everybody had to go and say, okay, I've got electronic crime, somebody's hacked my computer, what do I do? So they were basically implementing, assisting without a budget. And that takes you only that far. So there was a whole discussion about should we have a cybercrime legislation in completion, and as a harmonious one. And a legislation draft was brought out in 2003. We commented on that one. In 2004 again, another draft came out. We commented on that one. I personally, along with the International Chamber of Commerce, gave a commentary of 67 pages to the government on why that legislation really just needs to be revamped and done extensively. Most of the stuff in there has not been taken into account over here. I'm repeating myself, but I will tell you what the bill is about. Now, rather than go through the entire bill, there's a lot of things that are wrong with that bill. I'm going to concentrate on just a few specific areas because we don't want to get too deep and make this about an hour. Although, I think yesterday we went into an hour and a half, didn't we? Okay, although I said that. So very quickly, cyber stalking. Now, just before we read what's written over here and I say this is wrong, so let's start thinking, what is cyber stalking? What does cyber stalking mean to people generally? Can I just take some ideas from the audience? Anybody know what cyber stalking is?
Just following someone over the internet, social networks, that's following people.
Right, just following people, right? Anybody else?
Junky email, spam messages.
That's spamming, slightly different, but you could connect it maybe. Yeah, sure, why not? You could connect it.
You could send emails to that person, maybe try and add that person on your MSN even despite the fact that person doesn't know you.
Exactly, right? On IM, basically, on Skype or IM on Yahoo Messenger. So it's basically harassing a person or stalking a person electronically. SMSs could be part of that also. But they're not usually considered that. It's usually supposed, that would be electronic stalking. But cyber stalking is on the cyber space. Although this is an electronic crime bill, we're using the word cyber. They're confused. They're stuck between electronic and cyber, which is what I didn't mention yesterday. Anyway, but let's see what they think cyber stalking is. Communicate obscene, vulgar, profane, lewd, lascivious.
You can never get
I
that.
can never know. Lascivious or indecent language, picture, or image. So if you just send something which is supposedly obscene or vulgar to somebody else, you've committed the crime of cyber stalking.
But not if I say, can I have your number please, or will you do friendship with me?
Apparently not. Even though.
What did you say, what?
Yeah.
You can just go ahead and say, will you do friendship with me?
That guy's not stalking you. He has to do something obscene for it to be stalking.
But
And
who defines obscene?
nobody defines obscene. That
That's
would be
the
the court.
problem.
And what they should have
That's the
done.
problem in Pakistan.
Sorry?
Isn't that the fundamental problem in Pakistan?
Explicitly the problem with this bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's no one to define.
So that's the first. And now indecent. Now who decides what indecent is as well? I mean, all of these issues are there. There's no definition for this. There is a definition, I have to be honest, of obscenity in the Pakistan Penal Code, but you know it's highly controversial. Okay, and you can imagine what the government agencies are going to do if they just find something interesting on your computer, or if you're sending some interesting SMS.
What is the definition of obscenity in Pakistan Penal Code?
I'll give you a case that was Manto was actually used as a benchmark in a case that was used, and I wrote an arbitration award once in which I had to go and research about obscenity. It could just be the sexual antics of a person. If you wrote about that in literature, it might be considered obscene. That's how difficult it is. Because the last time we really talked about obscenity and tried to do this was in Lahore in the Lahore High Court, and basically that discussion was about that kind of stuff. So we really haven't come very far since then. Obviously things have changed a whole lot, but we're still stuck there.
Just to drift off the discussion, I know this will drift off a bit, but even educational documents that might be circulated at schools
Yes.
could be considered obscene in that context.
This is highly subjective.
Exactly.
It depends on the judge who's sitting on the bench who's listening to this case. And this case will go before a tribunal where the people who could be sitting on that tribunal have only had 2 years of district judge experience, and that is it. So that's the kind of level situation you're dealing with. Moving on, okay? Who decides what a picture and image is obscene or not? That's the difficulty. Next, make any suggestion or proposal of an obscene nature. It's as ambiguous as it can possibly get. That's not how you
That's
define
friendship stuff.
criminals.
No, that's not obscene.
Proposal. Threaten any illegal or immoral act.
Oh.
Now, you never
So if I say I'm going to beat,
So wait, if
that's an assault. That's a verbal assault.
so that's, no, I'm saying if I'm going to beat you, I haven't beat you. So I have committed verbal assault already?
Yes, you have. Well, in general law, yes, you have. In any case.
So this is an illegal act.
That would also be part of cyber stalking, even
Yeah,
though that's
but
not
that would be an
cyber
illegal,
stalking. Yes,
threatening
it
an
would.
illegal act.
Yes, it would.
So if I said I'm going to kiss you, would that be an immoral act?
Yes, it would.
So I'm stuck both ways.
You're not? Oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're stuck both ways. In fact, it would not just be considered an immoral act. It may be considered
Obscene, profane, vulgar, right? Yeah.
So wait, if I just said I'm going to violate a traffic signal, that's also going to be considered because it says illegal?
or immoral. Yeah, both.
Wow.
Serious problem.
That's an all-round coverage.
Passing of a bill in the parliament, is it after the president signed it or not?
No, the last thing that happens is the president signs it. But just before that, what happens is the National Assembly passes it. Okay, and the Senate has to pass it also. That stage is still about to come, but there's hardly any change in what goes into the National Assembly, okay, and what comes out usually, because you know what's happening out there. They don't necessarily have all the expertise out there to change all of this.
Or the
But that's
fundamental English language.
And also the steps that have been followed. It was drafted by the Ministry of IT, then it went to the cabinet,
Yes.
then it went to the Ministry of Law, then it went back to the cabinet, and it's gone through that process. Now only the National Assembly is left.
Has to
Do you
give it
expect
to
them to
people.
do anything?
So I don't think that's going to happen. So it's pretty much solidified. This is crystallized. This is what you're going to get, and that's why immediate change is required by telling the government they need to change it, or basically telling the National Assembly Standing Committee, who is going to look at this law, saying, look, this needs serious review. In fact, not just review an amendment, but structural change completely. To take or distribute, this is the best one. Pictures or photographs of any person without his consent or knowledge. Now, I don't know what that has to do with stalking. So if you distribute pictures of somebody else, that's not, maybe that's illegal, and that's a different kind of crime. It has nothing to do with cyber stalking, but here, it's cyber stalking.
So wait, if someone took pictures of this event and supposedly I don't agree, and Sabine puts them up on the website.
Well, that you can
You
anyway.
don't even
even
have
in
to
America.
agree or disagree without your consent.
That's
Without
right,
consent.
yeah.
Okay. She goes to
That
jail.
even in America.
Under
can
the
be.
cyber stalking.
Yes, and you'll be called a cyber stalker.
You haven't cyber
So we
stalk,
will
but
be
in America you
on
couldn't do that either.
Facebook.
You have to have a model release form.
But on the internet, there are photographs of women who had gone to the beach, and they just went to the beach, and there are pictures of them.
Yeah, but they are illegal.
On the
Anywhere, even internationally, without a model release form, except in public rallies,
But
etc. it's illegal.
these are just girls who had gone there. Could be anyone, and
And
without
probably
their
going to
name.
wear a
then
big
of
photograph.
course
It's an
they were
ethics
there.
issue,
They-
no? It's not a cyber stalking.
It's not a cyber stalking issue, it's an ethics issue.
You had a question?
I was making the same point that there are laws that refers to it. And making a point that if you don't have anybody's permission, you can't put them on television.
Exactly. This is not an electronic issue, this is not a cyber issue, this is the issue of the real world. And it definitely isn't cyber stalking.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even mention the fact that displaying them on the net. We're still talking about just taking or distributing pictures. Not even electronically.
And you were saying you don't have access to the actual bill?
I do, now I have.
So there's no subsection 22 clause C to actually
Clarify.
clarify or elaborate on any of these points?
This is all there is.
Okay.
Tragic.
Sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Supposedly, कोई किसी की picture है online. It's ripped off from that picture. For instance, I have this thing done to myself. My picture is on bbcurdu.com. The entire article was ripped off along with my picture, and it was posted on a forum.
Right.
How do I deal with it? Does
That's
this
it,
deal with that?
that's a breach of intellectual property. No, it doesn't deal with that.
Okay.
It should, but it doesn't. This law doesn't talk about that. That's a breach of intellectual property. That's something we do need to deal with. This law doesn't really deal with that exactly. No, it doesn't.
Which law does deal with
You
it?
don't have.
It should be the intellectual property law, the copyright law of Pakistan. Unfortunately, the copyright law of Pakistan calls computer programs literary works. It's defined under literary works. And they are only considered computer programs if they are readable into a device that can read them like a cassette player or a CD-ROM.
So browsers don't fall into that.
No, browsers aren't defined in that. That's sorry.
I have a question. Now, take or distribute pictures of this thing. Say, suppose like in my family album, I have a picture of the Kyle and Miss Jinnah arriving, standing on the steps of the state guest house then, or the Governor General's house, on 14th August 1947.
Yes,
Now, if I put them on the web,
yes.
I cannot get Qaeda Azam's permission
No.
or Miss Jinnah's permission. Is that cyber stalking?
If somebody complains and says this has happened, yes, probably. Because the trouble with this legislation is that it is so basic in what it says, it doesn't actually tell you what exactly is or wouldn't be. It's not clear enough. It's ambiguous. Therefore, things like that, which are ridiculous, would be open to abuse.
But
So nobody wanted to get
there is a concept of a public information.
Witch hunt.
If there is a, you see, that is a public information thing. I
No,
mean,
it's
one can go to a ridiculous level. That's a different thing. But when the courts are going to judge it, if there is something which is of public interest and which is of public, they would take that into account. See,
Agreed.
point
but
is that if there is
No,
an
but
accident,
there
and Benazir is coming down, and Benazir comes to Pakistan, or Nawaz Sharif comes to Pakistan, and of course everybody takes photographs in their publish. I don't think it deals with those type of issues. This is just
No,
interesting.
no,
because-
I don't think the problem is whether it deals with this. The point is it's so vague
Yeah.
that if on a witch hunt I could take you to court for it,
Yeah.
you can prove yourself innocent and then so can the judge. But you've got about 10 years wasted by the time I'm through with you.
No, but there's also another issue that we have tried to Islamize Jinnah's image. He was a very Western
Yes.
man. Now, if I were to post a picture on the web with him sitting with his dogs in his suit and solar hat, and Miss Fatma Jinnah in a sleeveless blouse and a sari, what would that be legally?
Legally, it's not.
Well,
It would be obscene, you would
I
be caught
think you
under
get
the
caught
obscenity
here.
act as well.
Vulgar, profane, lewd,
You
lascivious.
would say get caught here, and if you commented on something about the fact that it's perfectly fine for her to wear that, it may be a proposal or suggestion which is considered obscene.
There's a number of ways that you can get that.
See, now let me sort of clarify this. I get your point. You're right. The courts tend to be, and we expect them and hope for them to be reasonable. That's not necessarily the case that has actually happened in recent history. We have certain existing cases of Faisal Jahan and others where people were picked up for an absolute crime that they definitely did not even commit. When you draft criminal penalties and offences, what you do is you make sure that you define them very, very clearly. And you ensure that there are defenses within a criminal offense that you create, so that the individual has rights, there are exceptions, there are clarifications. You don't have them here. And that's the difficulty. It reads like a contractual clause, but it doesn't read like a criminal law. And that's the problem, and that's the difficulty.
Apart from the fact that it's not cyber stalking.
Apart from the fact it just is not cyber stalking. Okay. Last one, display or distribute information in a manner that substantially increases the risk of harm or violence to any other person. Now, display or distribute information that may substantially lead to harm to other people is a hugely vague area. Anything can pretty much fall
Absolutely.
into
I mean,
that.
if I were to say that Zahid has, I met him when he's wearing very good clothes and shows that he's well off, somebody else could commit violence on him and daketi kar de mara. That was not my intent.
Elitist colonizer.
You give out my email address, maybe.
That's enough, that could be.
Or you give my phone number to somebody, or somebody gives my address to somebody, somebody tells, that kind of information also. But if you're going to say that there is a policy reason why my privacy and my information should remain private, well, that's a different law. It's called a privacy law. That, of course, we should have. But that's not part of this stuff. So, obviously, the guy who drafted this. Now, let me ask you a question. Cyber stalking, as we know it, is it mentioned here?
From which we do need protection.
For which we do need protection. Or they wanted to protect us. So effectively the cyber stalker goes free, everybody else goes to jail.
At some point, can you tell the Faisal Chauhan story in 45 seconds or a minute?
Let me do that now so that people have an
Whenever.
idea. Because the question came out, look, you do need laws. And that came out yesterday also. Yes, we need laws, but laws have two parts. One is you create the offense, and then you create the balance. The balance is that, okay, this is the offense, but these are your rights to be able to defend against it. Otherwise, you're living in a Nazi police state. Okay. Let me give you an example of something that happened recently. Faisal Jahan was a guy who had an IT company. The PTCL was monitoring traffic, bandwidth traffic, and realized that on a particular IP address, there was a lot of traffic. And made a complaint to the PTA Telecom Authority, Pakistan Telecom Authority, saying, "Is jagah se bahut traffic aa rahi hai, voice over IP, which is regulated and it's illegal. Could you please find out ye kaun kar raha hai?" So they looked up the list, called the ISP and said, "Whose IP address is this? Who did you give this to?" They said, "Here's the list." They looked up the list and they made the mistake of checking the name against the number, but they checked the name below it. So the wrong number wala scene. The guy basically was Faisal Chauhan's company, Kauchali. So they raided his premises. Sat there and said, "You're running an illegal exchange from out here." Sat in his chair, shut down the office and said, "You're being picked up, took him to jail." The guy was put to jail for about a month and a half or so. His wife had a miscarriage during that period. He lost his business. All the contracts he had with Stanford University for jobs, etc. They cancelled the contract. Many other contracts that were there were cancelled because they shut down his computer, they shut down his business. And after doing that, when it was realized that oops, we made a mistake, it's our fault. The PTA guy who looked at it, the telecom, it was his fault. He still did not give a clearance in the court. Isko chhod diya jaye, humse galti hui hai. Scared that if he does that, he's admitting to having committed illegality, okay, or a negligence. So the guy continued to stay in prison. It was only after civil society, business, and certain interest groups put a lot of pressure, alright, which went right up to the Prime Minister and the President, especially the President, that then it came down and said, okay, cheek isko kuch kare na chhod. Then the Minister got into activity, the Secretary got into activity. So that's an example of the kind of stuff that can happen to you. That's just one law.
And the activity was actually happening within a government.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. The IP address which is generating all that bandwidth was a government organization.
Which also may have been the problem that you couldn't now name it.
Well, I can name it now.
No, at that time I'm saying that
number portability company.
Yeah.
The one that gives you the portability phone number. It wasn't their fault. They were doing something completely legal. They were authorized to do that. But we
Now,
decided.
if that young boy in his 20s didn't have several of us taking this issue up, he could have stayed in jail forever. Nobody could have
get back on his feet.
Not really.
No,
Not fully.
I mean, first of all, he was very shattered with the fact that he
And
lost
they
his child.
Hasn't been paid compensation,
Yeah,
not
paid
even a
nothing.
single penny by the government. The Minister for IT said he would pay compensation.
Nothing.
The Minister for IT 3 days ago stood up and said how horrible it was that this has happened to him. But his application with the Minister to pay the money is still pending. And they're saying, huh?
Yes, is about 2 years, a year and a half.
Gee, sir. And they actually, when he goes to them and says, sir, kya hua iska? नहीं हमने आपको कभी compensation नहीं कहा. So there's a complete paradox between what is said in public and what is done. Actually.
But this shows the misuse
Yeah.
of power.
Can I ask whether this Minister of IT is sort of literate or what?
Yes, he is.
Yes.
So his name is Mr. Owais Ahmed Khan Laghari.
He's Mr.
Farooq Laghari is nephew.
Nephew?
No,
Farooq Laghari is son. Farooq Laghari
They
is
all
son.
belong to the class where education does no harm to their value system.
Spamming. Talk about spamming, right? What is spamming to people? What is spamming? What do you when you spam? Anti-spam, spam, anti-spam.
Bulk email, bulk
Unsolicited.
unsolicited messages.
Okay. So let's read that. So we have to define. Remember, when you do a criminal section or an offense, you have to be very specific. Whoever transmits harmful, fraudulent, misleading, illegal, or unsolicited electronic messages in bulk. So if you send a harmful email in bulk, or if you send a fraudulent email in bulk, or if you send a misleading email in bulk, or if you send an illegal, and I don't know what that means, but illegal email in bulk, which I don't know, again, or an unsolicited email in bulk to any person without the express permission of the recipient, or causes any electronic system to show any message, so there's pop-ups also. Okay, that's not spamming as such, but anyway, alright, spam. Or, now here's where the problem starts. This is not a really good definition, but it kind of gets the point. But, or involves in, the grammar is completely off, involves in falsified online user account registration. I don't know what that means.
That hasn't been defined in the law.
It has been defined anyway. Or falsified domain name registration. How do you do a falsified domain name registration? You say you registered a domain name. How is it falsified? I go and I say I want to purchase CNN.com or jamil.com. So that has nothing to do with spamming. Again, this part has nothing to do with spamming altogether.
Another point is the fact that it says in message in bulk any person.
Yeah.
So essentially, if I send you one message unsolicited, I'm clear.
That's what somebody said yesterday.
Yeah.
It's not even clear on that point,
Exactly.
whether or not that is the case.
And whatever it's addressed to the company, then it's not a person. So you can, spam people.
Person is
Whoever
Spam
if it's coming
BBC.
from the company, maybe. Well, I mean, the answer to
No,
that.
I mean if you can spam BBC,
Yeah.
so it's not a person that I'm spamming.
No,
So is that okay?
it doesn't the definition of
Now,
a person involved in
the
the company.
difficulty with spamming is something. Now, let me tell you about spamming internationally. It's a huge controversial area to regulate and to have a criminal law about it. Okay, what they basically, the companies who advertise, do marketing says, we need to get our message across. If today Savi needs to get a message across to people saying, please come, she does need to send out a bulk email. Now, who decides, first of all, is it illegal? Secondly, if it's unsolicited. Now, you get a lot of messages saying, if you want to unsubscribe, click on this and you'll unsubscribe. That should be built in here somewhere as a provision allowing you, but it's not. It's a whole area. It's not a section that can deal with this problem. You need at least more provisions and sections to deal with the anti-spamming problem. So they've tried, what they've done is they've not really dealt with it. They've got the wrong definition. This won't work. So that's spamming. But I want you to see something else. This is also spamming. Now, on spoofing, which have been mixed together. What's spoofing to people? Generally, when they think about spoofing, what are they thinking?
Hiding identity, essentially.
Hiding your identity, right?
If I get an email from someone else, but it shows as from you.
So what exactly are you hiding? I mean, what changes? What do you do?
Original sender.
So
Your real identity.
Your sender.
The original sender.
The original sender, right? And is that basically the header? You messed around with the header?
Yeah.
And also the email account which it shows where it's coming from is not correct, right? It's the email account address that's the problem. Because people think it's coming from Citibank, or it's coming from Standard Chartered, or it's coming from eBay, but it's actually coming from somewhere completely different, right? What they've defined is establishes a website. Now that's where you first go. Spoofing has nothing to do with establishing a website. Or sends an electronic message, yes, with a counterfeit source. Now, the definition of counterfeit source can be many things. It's not just necessarily the email header that you changed. And that's the problem. You need to be specific in a criminal law. A counterfeit source, that's wrong, intended to be believed by the recipient or visitor or its electronic system to be an authentic source, fair enough, with intent to gain unauthorized access. Stop here just for a moment. Up till this point, spoofing is spoofing. That's the offense. You send an email and you're misrepresenting and you're impersonating somebody else. That's it. That's spoofing. Stop right there. But then they go further. With intent to gain unauthorized access to commit further offense or obtain the valuable information which later can be used for an unlawful purposes is said to commit the offense of spoofing. Now that is identity theft. That's when you get an email which is spoofed, which is an offense in itself, and then that spoofed email asks you to go to a website and give your personal data. So Citibank sends you an email and says, your account has been locked because of certain, somebody who's trying to hack it, etc. So could you please go to this website, put in all your information again, so we can verify that your online account is working fine. Okay, ठीक है. So you go to that online account, you put in your information, and that person gets your data and uses that data to access your bank account. Okay, that's a different thing altogether. That's what is written over here, and that's something called phishing and identity theft. But it's not spoofing. Phishing is, and this is what the definition, you look up Google, I picked up one of many definitions. By the way, our definitions don't conform to any international standard. The act of sending an email to a user falsely claiming to be an established legitimate enterprise in an attempt to scam the user into surrendering private information that will be used for identity theft.
Very clear.
Very clear, it's easy to read, it won't get you into trouble, but they didn't pick this up. Now all these definitions have been given to the government. They've had it for the last 3 years, but they haven't done anything about it. So that's your